Well, I want to first acknowledge the people who are going through the Being with Dying training. You're very fortunate to be in this training. It's been well crafted over many years, and it's probably going to give you an awful lot that you didn't study as a clinician. So I'm grateful to be with you, and I hope that my words can be of some small value to you. I'm feeling a little tender on this evening. My brother, Mark, he died about 10 days ago. He lived well, and I would say creatively, with his neuromuscular disease, some version of ALS that got diagnosed over 20 years ago. Yet he died unexpectedly and rather quickly from lung cancer a short time ago. A mass was discovered almost accidentally in his lung, and through a CAT scan, and then 3 weeks later he died. And I'm feeling tender. And in this Dharma talk, what I most want to do is to be real with you and not to abandon myself in the process. I couldn't be with my brother. He died before I arrived. I wasn't able to do the many comforting practices I've done with hundreds of dying people and their families. Sad about that. But also I couldn't fall back into the comfort of being a role. The clinicians in the room, those in the Being with Dying training, you understand that temptation when we're afraid or confused or powerless or temporarily flooded with strong emotions. You know the temptation to feel safe and to want to reach for and cling to that familiar role with all its well-established rules and perspectives and prescriptive behaviors. It's different when it's family. After my brother died, I was able to arrive at the hospital, and I told the staff that I wanted to see my brother in the morgue. And they were cautious. Maybe they were worried that it might be traumatic for me. And at first they said it wasn't possible. But with some insistence and reassurance, they agreed. And so they moved my brother into a small room on a gurney. And the first thing I noticed was that he hadn't been washed. He was unwashed. And honestly, he looked awful. And I wanted to bathe my brother, to be of service to my elder brother, who was also there. But that wasn't possible. I was left with the raw and unvarnished experience. At first, I pulled up a chair next to his body, and I sat meditation in order to sort of gather myself and remain quietly with his body. And then I stood and I began doing some familiar practices and some soft chanting, small ritual that I've done 1,000 times. But this time, honestly, it felt empty and dry. And I thought to myself, these weren't his practices. What am I doing them for? So I began to just speak honestly to him. And I said things like, I don't know if consciousness continues after death. I believe it does, but I don't know. And in my studies and conversations with great teachers, I've been told about what you might experience. And there are recommended practices, but I don't know if they'd be helpful to you now. I just don't know. And the more I was willing to not know, the more real it got. The more real our relationship became. I said, I know for sure that I love you. And I have faith that love can infuse any state of consciousness. You can trust love. I said, it won't abandon you. And I said, I don't know what else to do, but I'll remain here with you, trusting in that love. And the more I practiced not knowing, the more real it was. I'm not sure that anyone really knows what happens to us after we die. I know that one of the values in the Being with Dying program that Roshi and I have spoken about so often is the value of not knowing. Not knowing. Uncertainty. They're among the main teachings that Roshi and others are trying to transmit to you in this program. Not knowing. I don't know. But my question around grief and loss is always, how do we move toward the light of absolute truth and still accept and honor our very human nature? That's been my question. Certainly not by suppressing our grief, nor by attempting some kind of spiritual bypass around what's difficult. We might want to transcend our grief. Our spiritual friends, they tell us, just let go. You think it's so easy, you let go. That's what I tell them. There's no letting go until there's letting in. So a wiser, more compassionate approach, it seems to me, is to trust the process of grief. Maybe to recognize it as a path to wholeness. I don't know. But it's been my experience that allowing the grief and the anguish, it somehow allows us to pass through to non-grieving. In the old Buddhist text, there's an accounting of the monk's response to the Buddha's death. And it seems a pretty good description of the spectrum of grief responses that we might have if we were to lose someone we love. And I'll paraphrase it. It goes something like this, There were monks who had yet to overcome their passions. And they tore out their hair in anguish. And they raised their arms and they threw themselves down on the ground, twisting, turning, and weeping. And there were monks who were free of craving, who endured mindfully, reflecting on the truth of impermanence. In this passage, it's followed by some advice, which has always troubled me, actually. Not because it's not true, but because it's so easily misunderstood. And because advice rarely helps when it comes to grief. And one of the older venerable monks, he said something like, hasn't our teacher already told you that all things are pleasant and delightful or changeable? Subject to separation and to becoming something else? So why all this, friends? What is born becomes compounded, and becomes compounded as subject to decay. It cannot be that it does not decay. Coming together inevitably means parting. All true, all true. And today, while I might prefer to identify with those monks who were free of craving, today I would more likely find myself in the company of those who were wailing, when one they loved most had just died, as I found myself doing this past week. Personally, I would find it helpful if someone just sat beside me and listened, accompanied me in my sorrow. And I believe wholeheartedly that I could feel the love and concern of another who didn't want me to be any different. Someone who understood that this grief was my own. Someone who understood that I didn't want someone else putting their hands on my grief. And in the presence of such a person, I believe I could feel the pulse of life in their company. I would feel it as an encouragement. Someone with whom I had a heart-to-heart exchange, someone who could be with my suffering. Well, this would be more valuable to me than 1,000 truthful words. And perhaps eventually I'd be able to raise my head and see their face. Maybe they would have the eyes of compassion. But this could only be so if that person had investigated their own losses, their own fear. A person who in the service of healing could draw on their own helplessness and strength, on their wounds and passions. Then maybe we could discover an authentic meeting place where we appreciated that we're all tangled up in each other. I mean, each of us sitting here, beautifully unique, yet not fundamentally separate. I mean, even without a deep understanding of that, it becomes clear to us that our individual suffering connects us to the suffering of all beings. Isn't that true in your experience? Isn't there a value in that? I'm with a lot of people who seem to misunderstand spiritual practice as some process of transcending. But my sorrow and my grief that come with this loss I'm feeling today, it's not something I want to transcend. It doesn't make any sense to me. Trying to transcend states of mind or heart feels in some way false to me. And then it might deny my humanity. I don't think our goal is to overcome these states of body and mind and heart. I don't think of grieving or the process of bereavement as a process like when someone's sick and we're there to help them and get through their illness. And this way of thinking, it makes us imagine that when the individual is no longer grieving or bereaved, that they're better. And they can go on and resume their normal lives. I don't think it works that way. I mean, even the term to transcend it, it implies somehow going beyond, I'm not sure grieving is about going beyond. In my experience, it's more like going through. The process of grief and bereavement, it's a tremendous opportunity for growth and understanding, for opening one's heart. But there's no shortcuts. The only way is right through the middle. It's a visceral experience. It takes your breath away. For me, sometimes it feels like somebody had just punched me in the belly and I couldn't find my breath. It's completely unpredictable, uncontrollable. And it's this lack of control that leads us to the idea of trying to manage our grief or getting over our grief. Some of us think about grief as some kind of solid thing that will eclipse our life, like a black hole that we'll fall into and that we'll never escape. And this tendency that we have for self-protection, it leads us to store these conflicting emotions in some dark, cramped corner of our mind or heart or body. But the avoidance, the resistance to this grief only intensifies the pain. Believe me, please, when I tell you that the willingness to experience and investigate the pain gives rise to kindness, to compassion. And our loving attention has this way of, melting our well-constructed defenses and allows us to invite this pain into our hearts. pain we've so long rejected, had so little room for, somehow begins to be held in awareness. Not as some spiritual bypass, but the willingness to be with. And when it's related to in this way, grief has this capacity to show us how separate we may have felt in our lives, how fractured we've allowed our living to become. And meeting these experiences with some tenderness and mercy. Oh, we realize that grief is our common ground. It's a kind of connective tissue that joins us to others in our sorrow and joy. I mean, each of us here, the experience of our grief is completely unique. Let's not try and, homogenize this experience. I mean, sure, there are patterns and characteristics that are common to many of us, but each of us has our own grief that we need to own. And opening, if we're able, compassionately to that grief, we open to our whole self. We open to life. I've spent these last 7 days keeping my own version of Shiva, the ritual of Shiva, the old Jewish tradition of both honoring the dead and not turning away from the rawness of grief and loss. The loneliness, the blame, the shame, the anger, the periods of numbness where you feel like you're walking through molasses. In the process of grief and bereavement, we access parts of ourselves that were somehow unavailable to us in the past. And so part of staying with the rawness of the experience is that it can lead us to a profound understanding, not only of this particular loss of our own, but an understanding that reaches beyond our individual sense of loss, that opens us to the most essential truths of life. It opens us. Whatever we can give space to can move, can unfold, can show itself, and can be healed. There's no right way to grieve. There's just your way. Yesterday was the 7th day of my own version of Shiva. During this period of Shiva, period with myself, I just tried to stay quiet, and offline and away from phones and people and the things that I might want to distract myself with. And on this 7th day, I walked through my town. Like people might walk with their family and friends after sitting Shiva for 7 days. It's a tradition, it's part of that process. Taking a walk to demonstrate to ourselves and to others after a certain period of very intense mourning that it's necessary to re-enter the world. Even though the death of our loved one may still seem unbelievable to us or impossible to bear. which is how it's been for me sometimes. Still, we need to rejoin the world. So I walked through my village yesterday morning, and I had coffee and breakfast among people I didn't know. Important strangers. And tonight I'm speaking with you, my friends at Upaya. Rejoining the world, speaking to what this loss has been showing me and teaching me. So I want to ask you now, what's grief feel like? How do you experience it directly in your body? How do you feel it in your heart? What shapes does it take in your mind? I spoke with a Sangha of mine earlier, and I asked them to tell me about the raw experience, not their spiritual understanding. That would come later. And they just described what this experience was like. And one person said, it was like sleepwalking through life. And another said she was so perpetually exhausted for months. And as a result, had no clarity of mind, no ability to focus her attention. And there's one woman, I remember, she said, I had the feeling of indignation. Not why should this happen to me, but why should this happen at all? And she said that state of mind had her in this stance of fighting against feeling anything. How do you experience grief? One woman said there was so much fear. She'd never known so much fear. And it colored her grief. Fear that she wouldn't be able to survive without her partner of 35 years. Another man told me that the contractions in his chest were so tight that he thought he might die. And finally, he had to surrender to this grief, not some peaceful spiritual surrender, but utter defeat. And for me, in these past 7 days, there have been both subtle and explosive qualities that have emerged onto the surface of awareness. Sure, sadness, but also a surprising amount of anger. Not anger really directed at anyone or anything so much, just anger. I didn't involve myself with the content of that anger so much, but I could find in it the strength that's often tangled up in our anger. The strength that we need, that I needed, to stay with this process without turning away, without getting lost in distractions. How does it show up for you? If you weren't trying to be a spiritual person or a knowledgeable person, you were just in the rawness of your experience, how does it show up for you? And what helps? I believe it helps to not deny what you're feeling. To let the grief happen, to allow yourself to feel it completely. And to see that the more you push away, the more it clings. It helps to know that we can develop a spaciousness around these incredibly strong feelings so that the grief has room to move, to show us all its faces. For me, it helped to hold paradox, to understand that grace and grit are partners in this territory. Grief challenges all our notions of control. It does for me. It cracks our defensive shell of invulnerability. And it exposes the way we hide from our human frailty. I have felt so mortal in these last few days, so close to my own dying. It helps to recognize how often we choose comfort over truth. It helps to see that we have these individual and cultural habits around managing our grief, that we're afraid and impatient, and in our own unexplored fear of grief, it can lead us to hurrying others along this path of healing. And that's really important to know as a clinician. It helps not to hold models of recovery too tightly, to impose some recovery map on an individual's grief. When we do that, we do them a great disservice, and perhaps even harm them in the process. Sometimes, even for ourselves, we take something out of the past, some knowing we have, and we impose it on the present moment. And I think in a way what happens when we do that is we do violence to the present moment. We don't let it just be as it is. And so I want to ask you a second question, which is, how does our dharma practice help us in this territory of grief? How does it help us? I wish I could talk to you. I wish maybe people can write. Can people write something in the chat?
People can speak from here if you'd like.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you. I won't be able to see them, but it would be helpful if I could hear from a few people now, rather than my just talking. I want to know, really, how does your practice help you in the territory of loss and grief? And no highfalutin ideas, no things you read in a book. I want to know, in your direct experience, does it? And if so, how does it? How does your practice actually help you? And no, you'll have to call in people and get them a microphone because I can't see.
Yeah.
Is there someone there who's willing to say directly, be real? How does your practice actually help you? Come on. Let's hear from you.
Hi, Frank.
Hi.
It's Casey. We met many, many years ago at the hospice project. I'm currently experiencing a great deal of grief. I learned of the loss of someone very dear to me today. And I don't know what my answer is. I'm just kind of going on the fly here. So
go to your direct experience, Casey. No ideas. How does your practice help you? What are you doing through your practice that helps you right now?
Breathing.
Breathing, okay.
I'm breathing.
How does it help you breathing?
It helps me feel my body.
Okay.
It helps me feel the earth beneath my feet.
Okay.
It helps me
How does it help you to feel your body, Casey?
When I breathe through.
Yeah, I got it. You that helps you sense your body, but feeling your body, how does that help you with grief? Tell me about that.
Because I feel the grief throughout my body. I feel like if I don't let myself ground while I'm feeling it, that
Yeah.
I like falling apart. I love watching a movie that makes me cry.
Yeah.
But what I really want is to just feel all of my pores open to the experience.
How come?
Because I want to be present. I want to bear witness to myself. I want to bear witness to what's going on within me as I'm feeling the sadness,
Right.
surprise.
So let me ask you, Casey, when you feel, I think grief is a body experience. We sit around in circles and support groups and talk about our grief, but I think it's physical, often very physical. And that contact with our physical experience gives access to our emotional life, gives access to our states of mind. Is this your experience?
Yeah, it definitely is. Mm-hmm.
Okay, beautiful. So I breathe, and my breathing helps me touch my body, and touching my body, sensing my body gives me more access, gives the space in which things can unfold, can show themselves, can be known.
Yeah.
Be felt and known. Beautiful, Casey. Beautiful.
Thank
All
you.
right. That's good. Let's give somebody else a chance to speak. How does your practice actually help you? That's important. I'm a spiritual pragmatist. I want this to work in our everyday lives. So someone else, Noah. How does your practice actually help you?
One person.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No.
One person says here from YouTube, Sangha, not being alone with my grief.
Sangha helps us, to be in the good company, but not just people who are trying to make us feel better, but to be in wise company, the company of people who can allow us to be just as we are and don't need us to behave differently or somehow, again, this notion of transcending that we have, just to be down in the gutter with us sometimes. Yeah. We won't stay there. That isn't the only experience that we'll have, but we got to be willing to go there sometimes. I think our practice helps us to understand that we're not victims, that we can calm ourselves. That's a way our practice can help us. We can come into the present. We can resource our innate compassion. We can make wise choices. For example, whose company we keep. We can feel deeply, profoundly, without being overwhelmed. We can share our grief, as we were just speaking about a moment ago, with others, and our practice helps remind us that there's a power in naming the grief. This is grief. What else is on people's hearts or minds? I can't see the zendo, so I'll rely on you, Noah. Don't be shy. Please come. Have the courage to speak to your direct experience.
One person online says, my practice grounds and centers me in the present moment where I'm interconnected to all life and deep realms that surround me.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. If you can have all that, that's remarkable. If all of that is the outcome of your practice, that's remarkable. Sometimes I think what my practice does is just help me sit down. And when I sit down, I'm less likely to run away. Sitting on my cushion, I'm less likely to run away. And that's valuable. Our practice helps us to understand that vulnerability is not weakness. That trying to get rid of our vulnerability is a kind of conceit. It cuts us off from our own hearts. It makes it difficult for us to be with our own or others' grief. for me in practice, it helps me to understand that living well isn't about eradicating my wounds and my weaknesses, but to see how they equip me to being with others.
We have one in the room here, Frank.
Okay, please. And I'm conscious of time, so I know I'm not good at time, Noah, as you know. Who else in the room wants to speak?
My name is Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, thank you. My practice only helped me in one way.
Why was
It's not that it actually helped me that it added something. Just because of my practice, I didn't have the thought that it shouldn't be, that something was wrong, that it was unnatural. And when I'm talking about my grieving, my reaction, that I didn't have the thought that whatever I was feeling wasn't supposed to be there, that something was wrong, that all the horror, all the deep sadness and sorrow, that didn't indicate that something was broken, that I didn't have to turn away from it because it wasn't natural or something, that I could allow it because I knew it was natural, and nothing was wrong with it.
Right, Mark, beautiful. So when you understood that, Mark, if I may, when you understood that it was natural, that there was nothing wrong with your grieving, what did that make possible?
For me to feel the grieving, for me to feel that sorrow deeper and deeper, and to not to turn away from it,
Right.
just to experience it, that because it's not broken, because it's not normal, because it's not normal, it allowed me to just sit with that horrible feeling of loss, feeling of missing, feeling of grief, feeling of wanting that object of my love to still be there.
Of course.
I could feel all that and not turn away from that horrible, not wanting what I was, having to face, and just not having to turn away from it.
Beautiful, Mark. So, this is why I say that vulnerability, at least for me, is one of the most exquisite of human capacities, because it allows the beauty and the horror that you're speaking of that exists in our world or in our life to impress itself on our souls, to impress itself on our consciousness and hearts. Yeah. And then there it can be known. And it's not just that it can be felt like an emotional state, but it can be known, it can be clearly comprehended, and it can help us to grow in wisdom, and not just, another piece of information, but embodied wisdom that then we can walk through the world with. And I'm wondering, Mark, if part of what you experienced as you allowed all this feeling to be there, what did it enable you to do?
It enabled me to experience it so thoroughly that I was able to achieve wholeness from not having to separate something from myself, just to face whatever I was feeling, to, like you said, just to go through it and not think that anything was wrong with what I was going through, all the grief and horror, and just the pain, just the horrible pain of knowing that was the pathway itself, the pain.
Right. That often the healing is found by going toward the suffering, when we're always running in the other direction, right? But you're helping to remind us that going toward that which we want to run away from is actually where the healing is often found. Yeah. And that it isn't a matter of just enduring, Mark. It's not like, oh, I got through it, Oh, it was tough, but I got through it. No, it's clearly comprehending. It's knowing that this is part of the human condition, and we don't abandon our humanity, our humanness, through our spiritual practice. We don't come to a place where we think our spiritual practice is one thing and our humanity is another. We realize them to be one thing. Yeah. And then the way in which we walk through the world is fundamentally changed. Yeah. We're not high, and we're not on some pedestal. We're not some adept. We're just an increasingly realized human being. Yeah.
And what you just said made me realize specifically, I think what I got from it was just the satisfaction that I knew I was with the object of my love by experiencing that pain. Even though they're already past, I still got the feeling I was with them in that connection, that I was bearing witness to. I know they're already passed and they didn't need anything to bear witness to. They had the, luxury of passing. But I feel like I got to be with them, bear witness to it, that my grieving was the connection to them, that I'm with you.
Yeah. And grieving is the way you love them.
Yes.
It's the way you love them. Now, Roshi and I were teaching somewhere, I don't remember what we were doing, but someone in the course of that teaching told us, use the expression, grief is a love that has no place to go. Yeah. But I think it's the way that we love the people that have died, that we've so-called lost, because Mark, the relationship with that person, it continues even after they die, right? I mean, my mother died 50 some odd years ago, more than that, almost 60 years ago, but we're still working out shit, I mean, the relationship doesn't end there. And I suspect this is true for the people that you love. The relationship continues. And it's not just a fond and warm and fuzzy memory. We're still working out stuff. We're still conducting the relationship. Yeah. Even when someone has died. And so they remain in our life, that we go through life and we carry them with us. That's part of what enables us to rejoin the world. We don't go back to the way it was before. There's no going back. We've been reconstituted by this loss. We are changed by it. But we go forward and we rejoin the world, carrying that person that we love who has died in our hearts and in our minds and bodies, really. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Noah, you have to remind me, because... Yeah.
This is perfect.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Thank you so much. I know we'd all love to just keep going, and almost 300 people online would love to speak with you too. So thank you for this time. And we have many programs coming up with Frank. June 25th, Being with Loss, Love and Death with Frank and Roshi in August, and your 4 flavors of love on the 4 Viharas will be a series starting in September. So I'll put the link in the chat, and just thank you all for joining. And Frank, thank you for sharing your heart.
Oh, Noah, thank you for the kindness that you always show me so effortlessly. And I'm extremely grateful for that. Really grateful. And to all the Being with Dying people who are in that program, you are so fortunate. You are so fortunate. Don't miss a moment. Don't miss a moment. This will change your life. Thank you very much, everyone. And nice to be able to share our hearts together tonight. Did me good. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. And we'll end with the 4 great Bodhisattva vows.